Hi, everybody. Welcome to our 13th week, lucky number 13 of the HCBiz show. Shahid is back with us today. Always excited when you're here. Thanks for a good conversation in and of itself. So today we were focusing in the tweet chat. We started this talking about medical billing and the process from the patient point of view. I told a little story, not a big deal, but a silly situation that I went through on that side. I guess I'm still going through it in my post leading up to this. And really the gist, without getting into all the details of it, was that I never really got bills directly from anybody. I got lots of things that implied I might owe people money, and those dollar amounts changed all the time. And there seemed to be a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes between the doctors and the hospitals and the insurance companies, and they, for the most part, have worked all of it out, but it's still not resolved, and I still don't know who I owe money to. And from a patient point of view, that's pretty nutty. And I kind of started thinking about this again because at HD Palooza, they announced a contest. HHS and AARP are supporting MadPow and Health 2.0 in the A Bill You Can Understand challenge. And it's pretty neat. It's like $10,000 in prizes or something like that. So not huge money involved, but what I find really interesting about it, and what kind of got me thinking again, is that they've got some groups behind the scenes. I think Geisinger Health might be one of them. 4 or 5 big groups that are saying, whoever wins this contest, we're going to basically try to take some of their stuff and put it into use, which I think is a really cool outcome of a contest. You don't typically see that kind of backing. So, long story short, it got me thinking about it again, wrote that post, and then in the traditional HCBiz sense, it's about, we want to think about how to make the patient experience better, but like our conversation here is always about, well, how do we do that on the business side, and how do we make that make sense on the business side? And my take on it is pretty straightforward in this case. I think it's an easy issue, is as more and more of the percentage of bills that the practices and hospitals are sending out need to be paid directly out of the pockets of patients, the more important it is that they make it a good, easy process for those patients to pay. So that was the basis for the chat today. And what I wanted to get some of your thoughts on is, how, as practices and hospitals, how do we engage those patients up front so that we know what is going to be their responsibility? How do we communicate that to them? How do we make sure that they are buying into what we're telling them they need to do, or what services they need to take, and that the dollars that they need to pay for them are reasonable? And I think this becomes a bigger and bigger issue as we continue to go on. Not even in just thinking not thinking in a DPC sense or anything like that, but thinking in the sense of just everyday care. If I got a high deductible health plan, first $2,500 coming out of my pocket, how are you going to get me to pay? That's hugely important to your business. And that's what I wanted to dive into today.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. I'm glad you brought it up. Last week, I was at the direct-to-consumer healthcare marketing conference. I did a couple of panels and talks there, and most of that audience, probably 80% of it, were health insurers. So they also have this problem. I mean, the consumers need to have more power, more data, and they're trying to work that out. So we had really good conversations. I really especially liked Providence Healthcare, very big healthcare system in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and their head of marketing literally talked about every one of the topics that you just said. How do we provide more transparency, et cetera. So the way I look at this is that there are 3 places where this transparency is necessary. Place number 1 is, how much is this stuff going to cost me? What will my out-of-pocket expenses be at the time that I'm making a plan selection? So just yesterday, I sat with the founder of a company called Health Lucid. His name is Anil. Anil was showing me some of the work that they're doing with respect to how to provide a level of transparency that was unheard of even a year ago to patients, to let them know, okay, well, what are your current conditions? What are your ailments? And then based on that, at plan selection time, you will know if I need these drugs, and I might, I might have 3 or 4 child visits. What can I actually expect? Like if you're doing a plan selection at this time, you don't really get much of that. You say, okay, I want a $5,000 deductible.
Yeah,
You
right.
just don't know if you're going to blow that deductible in the first month or if you're going to need it the entire year. And so that's one area that we need a bit more technology. And that one is more about technology, but really the data sharing necessary for coverage, claims, properly adjudicated information, et cetera, from health plans is fairly substantial. So it might be good for those interested on the health plan side. Contact me. I can hook you up with Anil and some of the guys doing that work. Then there's the issue of, so you've made the plan selection, good or bad. You didn't, whether you got good transparency, bad transparency. Now you're in the system and you need services from the healthcare side. So if you look at labs, if you look at imaging centers, those are probably more hidden to you than the provider, because you get to see the provider. You almost never get to actually, quote, see what's going on in some of these labs and other areas. So what I think is going on is if we can start to provide, if health plans working with providers can start to show the amount of deductibles just on a regular basis, either through emails or other means, kind of like a mint.com does with respect to your budgets and things like that, having the ability, and by the way, no health plan is going to do this on their own. No health provider is going to do this on their own. We need to work on both sides from a business perspective to say, look, I'm not asking you to create all these tools. Where can I access the data? So, a couple of weeks ago when we had our talk, I was at the HL7 Partners in Interoperability Conference, where we were talking about FHIR, F-H-I-R, and how the APIs can be connected. So there's a lot going on in that space, how quickly it might be made available to allow simple review of, what is my current deductible? What am I going to be responsible for today versus someone else? So there are companies like PocketDoc, Doximity, and others that are connecting up a variety of different sources. So if you're an innovator, whether on the health plan side or the healthcare provider side, meaning hospitals and health systems, or an innovator, you're wondering what to create, start looking at those kind of companies like PocketDoc, who has eligibility access and is pooling those. So, part A was, what's my transparency going to look like before I get my health plan? Part B was, when I need my services, what should I expect at the time that I expect it? I mean, if we went to Amazon and we're ready to buy something and then it told us the price after it told us that you've already purchased, that would be a bad idea. And that's really what we're doing in healthcare is we basically purchase and then we're told, oh, by the way, this is how much it costs, which I think is what you're alluding to in your anecdote. So the third piece then is, after you've gotten the service, you were told that this might be your responsibility as far as what the quantity is. Now the explanation of benefits, the bill that you receive, this is that cool thing. So I was at HD Palooza this week, and lots of great stuff happening there. I mean, I'm really excited that we're finally, thank you, everyone, beyond this cheerleading phase of talking so much about what is possible. And really, it was nice to see what is now actually there. And so I was really excited to see some very, very boring vendors in the exhibit hall selling, things like access to data, selling things like pooled data that you could use, just all the boring stuff instead of flashy apps everywhere, which what we saw 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Yep. Now you see, there are still flashy apps, so don't get me wrong, and people are still trying to make their case as if, that cool mobile app that they created is somehow going to change the world, and of course it will not. It's these very, very boring plumbing, pickaxes and shovels, etc. If I'm trying to give you, let's say, Don, I'm trying to give you pricing that you should expect, the number of things that have to go right in order for me to provide that pricing to you is extremely high.
Sure.
And so all the plumbing, all the APIs, the data that has to be already there, like my friend Anil that I was talking to yesterday, I mean, he has just spent months working with all kinds of different providers, grabbing their data, looking at pre-adjudicated data, post-adjudicated data, connecting that with what your expected medication is likely to be. It's a very, very complicated scenario. I mean, I made the Amazon example sound really simple, but of course, nothing in healthcare is that simple.
Right.
When you look at all three of those areas, I think the first area is reasonably solvable, if nothing else, because I saw it solved in one way yesterday.
Right.
Second piece is a little bit harder because where you get the service for example, if you're about to get service through labs or through imaging or through a doctor's office or through a hospital, them predicting what they're going to do for you, unless it's a pre-appointed, and if it's an emergency, you can forget it. I mean, they can't always predict that. But if you're coming in for an appointment, it's a well baby visit. Okay, you should be able to tell in general what those are. But then connecting these up at the health system side is really, really tough. So I think if you look at the bookends, as I sign up for my plans, what do I expect? After I get my service, what should my bill be? There should be no excuse for getting those wrong, right? There's just so much data that's a straight B2B. Now, in the middle piece here, that's when it starts to get a little interesting. So that's where I think the questions that you posed in your most recent blog post were terrific. I think that we should look at them in this natural HC Biz format, which is, let's not complain about it. Let's see, what can we do? Who's doing this work? Where is the data available? And so when you evaluate data-driven decision-making in healthcare, which is what everybody is shooting for, data-driven decision-making, then where the data comes from, how much is available, what can I use today, what can I not use today, become very, very important. And that's the conversation we all need to start in a very sophisticated, disciplined way that says, in order for me to solve this problem, and this is what I really appreciated at Datapalooza this year, is conversation after conversation after conversation was not about what we wished we could do. Now we have real use cases. We're saying, I want to do this, and in order to do this, I need these 4 pieces of data. Now let's roll back and see where I can get that from, and that's even whether it's even possible, instead of saying, okay, all the data that we have now is going to cure cancer. Of course it's not. There's still plenty of data that we need there. So this is a great conversation that when we look at these events going on, like the direct-to-consumer one, or next week I'll be heading up the Health Impact New York event on the 17th. This is where we can get together in a multi-institution, multi-stakeholder way, because these problems cannot be solved by us talking to doctors or just the health plans or to an imaging center. We've got to figure out how do we bring those together in a way that we can tie that with folks in the field that are doing the job. So if I go to PocketDoc tonight and say, well, what APIs do you have available? They might say, here's 5 APIs, and that gets me to 50% of my problem. Then I can go to PocketDoc or someone else and say, could you add 3 more APIs for me? And that's how we solve real problems. And so that's why this is a good conversation.
Yep, I agree 100% with all of that. And are you getting that feedback? All right. Maybe it's just me. So off to the side panel here, Sharice had a couple of good questions about the motivations from the insurance, or more comments about motivations from the insurers. So we're not going to get them to just start doing this stuff. And you alluded to that too. Payers aren't going to do it alone. Doctors aren't going to do it alone. So what are the primary motivations of each, do you think? And how do we use that to get the right people involved? Doctor side, they want to get paid for sure. I think that's a huge issue. Cash flow is king when it comes to running any business, so it's going to be important in a practice or a hospital. On the payer side, why would it be good for the payer to make this data available? Like, why is Providence doing the thing that you mentioned to get that transparency out there? Why is it good for them?
Yeah, great question. So number one, everybody wants to move more into direct-to-consumer. So this idea that patient centricity, consumer centricity is big. And so I spend a little time as an entrepreneur in residence, kind of like a fellow at the AHIP Innovation Lab, where we talk to payers all the time. And last week, as I mentioned, about 80% of them were payers. This idea that direct-to-consumer is important, I'm not even worried that they don't understand. They get it. They're spending money. They're doing it. So I don't see that as a big issue. What can they do, and why is it important? So let's look at the why is it important. Number one, these are their members. When somebody has a payment problem, the last person, like even in your case, you would more blame a faceless corporation than your doctor. So even if it was the doctor's complete fault, which it almost never is, it's a combination of problems going on, the last person you're going to complain is the guy providing you care. You're going to say that, that crazy health insurance plan, and they get that. These guys, especially like at the D2C, the direct-to-consumer marketing, they know that when something goes wrong, they are to blame. So they're on it. I don't see.
Okay.
I mean, I see that there are people with smaller health plans that have less resources, of course, but I don't see that this level of sophistication is so high that we have to convince them that they need to do the right thing. They all know they have to do the right thing. These guys, so payers, for example, this is the reason why they came to the HL7 Partners in Interoperability, wondering, how do I get access to what services you performed, dear doctor? Because what they know is what was claimed, not actually what was performed. So these are two different institutions, right? Payer and provider. They both need the data. In some cases, the payer has more data because they can see what's happening across the ecosystem. So they know what insurance, what they were charged by imaging, what they were charged by lab, what they were charged by doctor, et cetera. But the doctor or the imaging center only has one silo. So if you look at it, a physician has a narrow but deep amount of data, and how they share that with the ecosystem is very different than the overall care management through claims only. By the way, that's all that most providers have today. They can tap into a little bit of health information exchanges, but the data use rights, et cetera, aren't really there. So it's one thing to say, hey, why aren't health insurers just doing it? But again, in true HCBiz format style, let's not complain about it. Let's figure out what are the gaps. The gaps are that the depth of data necessary that is available at the care provider organization. How can we get those connected up? That's going to have to be FHIR. It's going to have to be data use and reciprocal rights agreements. And I think that those payers that really have a very good, and this is why we suggest to payers that they start this concept of a good, solid payer-provider collaboration, where providers don't think that payers are after them and payers don't think that providers are after fraud.
That's what I was going to say. The trust issue there, getting the providers to share all of that clinical data with them is an issue today for sure.
Absolutely. So to Sharice's point, I think she's absolutely right that payers need the incentive, but I argue they already have the incentive. They understand it. These are big businesses. They don't. It's not like they don't get it. What they don't know is what is now available. How can we do this? So we sit in solution group or after solution group at the AHIP Innovation Lab. We have doctors sitting there. We have nurses sitting there. We have actuaries sitting there. We have care management people from plans sitting there, and they're all trying to figure this out. Where is the data? There is no one person to blame, which means no one person can fix this. Which means, and this is my point, not speaking for anybody else, there's no adult in the room. We all think that it's the government, right? Like, for example, last night I was at the Politico Outside In cybersecurity event, and people were like, well, what can the government do to help us? If we ask that question, holy cow, are we in for a very bad awakening over the next few years? We cannot wait for them to do this. We have to get together. My suggestion is that payers, whoever's got the risk on the person, meaning like in our case, the insurer, they should be the adult in the room. They're bringing everybody together. They're saying, here's what we need in data. They make the connection points. And this is a long, long process over the next few years as insurers move from being just payers into managers of care.
Okay. So if the payers of the adult in the room, how do you see them dealing with that trust issue with the providers? Through your experience with AHIP or at this conference that you were at last week, how is that issue being addressed? Because we got two motivated parties. We've got an adult in the room. How do we get them to really start moving that data? Or is that already starting to happen?
So it's definitely happening. And that's what I was mentioning. I liked what the guys from Providence were saying, because what they've done basically is they've said, we are the adult in the room. We're going to work this out. And so they were describing what their direct-to-consumer model would be for accountable care organizations and a risk-bearing approach to patients, where they say that, like, for example, the health maintenance organizations, HMOs of the 90s, are transitioning over into ACOs of the 2000s, 2010s, et cetera. I think that any organization in which there's still fee-for-service are hopeless. You're not going to be able to do this. You have to say that this member is ours, not mine, not yours, but ours. And if you're not in an ACO track 1 or track 2, if you're not in a PCP or a PCP plus format, if you're not in a direct primary care where you're saying, I own the entire experience for member together in this group, then we can forget it. I mean, so this idea of fee-for-service being solvable, I think is probably not the case, except for one-offs, right? Not systemically, that's going to be very difficult. But you can have hospitals.
So we're looking at groups, payers and provider groups that are already very tightly affiliated in order to do these types of things.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you can see that in other industries as well. When banking sector connected up and said, we're going to bring our supply chain partners together, that's how you can go to any 7-Eleven and pull cash out of the machine. When airlines in the 70s got together and said, you know what, we are all competitors, but if we don't share this data, I can't get my planes into your hub at LaGuardia. You can't get your planes into my hub at LAX. So let's work together. Let's put this into a unified system. And oh, by the way, we're going to do this in a way so that the data that is common to us all, we all equally see transparently. But whatever data is premium, specific pricing, how that pricing works, et cetera, that's going to be differentiated and kept private. So there is, there's a system like in the airline industry or in others where this does work. It's not perfect, but there's a model here in that we have shared resources like airports and airline resources that they're using throughout the country. But at the same time, they have shared benefit and shared differentiators that they would like to have. So what we see in healthcare is when we start to wake up and see we're not the first people with this problem, that there are others, let's look at how they're solving it and move towards those directions, then we start to win. And what I'm really happy about is, I've only been working in the payer industry for a couple of years now. But before I actually started working inside the industry, I also had that trust factor problem where these are faceless corporations, they're just sucking up money and they don't want to give it back to the system. But that's not true. I mean, the ACA has really forced them into a narrow path. They must do some of these things. They just don't know how because we're not connected yet.
Right. So now you kind of excluded all of the fee-for-service work from this, and that'll be if that's true, that's going to be a huge issue for us over the next few years because the percentage of the money flow is still going to do so through that program, fee-for-service. So how are all of those, the doctors that are already going to have the pressure coming down from, small practice stuff, macro, all of that you're hearing about right now? They're going to have these financial pressures. We've got high deductible health plans, more and more people going into them every year. So more of their receivables are going to be out to patients. What should they do? Because they've got now this double pressure of potential penalties coming down from Medicare and then growing receivables on the patient side that they can't collect on or that they're having difficulty collecting on. So what can those guys do in the short run while they're still doing the straight mix program?
No, that's a great point. And the good news is it's not like they're left out in the cold. So when you have a sophisticated provider organization, they already have lines of credit appropriately. They'll have invoice factoring capabilities where, invoice factoring basically means I know this money is on its way, but in the next 60, 90, 120 days, I can factor that invoice, get advance payment, and then work through the problem on the back end. The nice thing is that there are a number of startups, and some of them I saw at Datapalooza that are offering the capability of pre-billing before patients coming in. You ask them, why are they coming in? Will they be able to pay? Help them. So what we were talking about in the first 15 minutes of this conversation is what could we do systemically? If we move away systemically and say that's an ACO problem and say, okay, what do we do with fee-for-service? Now it says it's one by one, and I focus on what's good for me. So if I'm the provider, I need to get more sophisticated about knowing my customer, my population. Like it's funny in healthcare, we call it population health. Everybody else just calls it customer relationship management, right? I mean, you're in this business, you know how silly that is. But if you knew that customers were coming in, whether you run a spa or a gym or a doctor's office, you need to know, can this person pay? So there are ways of knowing pre-registrations. You can check. There are very quick ways of doing background checks, credit checks. And then there are many EHRs that will do eligibility checks properly, pre-eligibility before people come in. And a lot of good organizations, and Charisse is on this right now. She probably knows of many organizations that do this reasonably well. and others that kind of forget that this is their job, right? In a fee-for-service world, nobody's taking care of you. It's your job to take care of you. And in an ACO, that changes slightly. But until then, you have to use standard mechanisms, of which there are many, that are available outside of healthcare. So if you're looking inside of healthcare, there are actually interesting startup opportunities to do healthcare focus factoring, healthcare focused pre-checks of your patients. If you knew, like for example, before you went to go see the doctor, if they checked on you in advance and knew you were about to hit this deductible, they would say, are you sure you would like to take the service now, or do you want to do it when you get back home?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah,
so good news is they're not left out in the cold. It's just they have to do a lot more work on
around. Sure. And to the startup opportunity too, and you mentioned them earlier, Pocket Doc, those eligibility checks is one of the things their API will do for you. And that's in there. We'll do these transactions for free as well, because all of those, kind of straight eligibility checks and billing checks and things like that with insurance companies, they'll set you up with the API today, and you can start doing that. So they don't charge you at all anymore as of, I think, October.
Yeah, that's right. That's a
huge opportunity there.
That's a great point. And in fact, if you're a healthcare provider, you should ask your EHR company, your LIS company, anybody that's doing your work within your office, RCM, to make sure that they have connections to Pocket Doc or other API providers like that. Make sure that they can do these pre-eligibility type of checks. Just like, you would not buy an EHR that can't do e-prescribing. You should not buy an EHR, or you should force your EHR company to have these customer relationship type of checks to make sure that they can do this. So the good news is there is a basic amount of stuff ready and available. Now, every provider doesn't have influence on their EHR company like they would like. But if you make a small user group of 5 doctors, 10 doctors, 20 doctors in your area, and you say, as a team, I'm going to Athena Health, or as a team, I'm going to Cerner, you get listened to a little bit differently than if you went by yourself, where the sales guy will, buy you a cup of coffee and say, hey, thanks for the advice, doc. But you go with some friends and be willing to push hard on the vendors, you'll get some of these features in as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's important to remember that there's always something you can do, no matter how much of a brick wall you feel like you're banging against. There's some different way of looking at it. It's a group of people you can get together. I think that's an awesome example. So I know you're getting tight on time here, and we wanted to talk about your event next week in New York City. So Health Impact, you do them all over the country. Upcoming on the 17th, I believe, is in New York City. Let's talk about that. What do you guys do there? What's different about that one-day show than some of the other events that you attend throughout the year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that up. So next week is in New York. We've got Los Angeles on June 8th. Later this year, we do Chicago. Earlier this year, we did Tampa and Houston as well. The big difference is that when Megan Antonelli, who's my partner on the event, who used to work at World Congress and other places, great event runner, great producer of events. When she said, would you do this? What I really said is why? Why do we need yet another event? And so the way I look at this is my specific feeling is we don't need more lecture-based events for high-level people who are making decisions. They need to know reality. So with Health Impact, what I like to do is we have a no PowerPoint rule, chats and conversations all day only. So we'll do all kinds of different topics: patient engagement, cybersecurity, RCM selection. Is your EHR giving you enough value? And so, on the agenda, you'll see many of these topics. But the important part is we'll have people who are doing this work on a regular basis up on stage. We might have a innovator or two in each one of the panels to say, here's what's coming up in the future. And then in the audience, nurses, doctors, CMIOs, CIOs, chief architects and things, and folks who are actually doing this work. And so what I like to say is we need actionable advice, very similar to what we're doing with HCBiz here. We need advice that's operationalizable, and we need to bring trends out of the cheerleading mode into reality mode to say, what can we actually do, right? Not everybody can do all of these cool things. Not everybody can work on curing cancer. So stop telling me about precision medicine every 5 minutes, right? What am if my problem is I have ransomware attacks and I have no way of recovering data, it's not going to help to have a lecture about how great future cybersecurity might be. You need solutions today. need. And so what we try to do is bring these folks together, the ones doing the real work, make sure that you're not being lectured to or talked down to, but really we're all in the same problem together. There are no organizations up here at the top and then everybody else is down here. Everybody is swimming roughly in this area. And when you're swimming in that area, each one of us can provide help to each other. So that's how I see Health Impact is. It's a conference that I would love, whether, because I'm speaking all day at it in the various panels, but this is the conversations that we would all love to sit in. Like this conversation we're having today. Imagine 8 hours worth of this with all kinds of people doing all kinds of different things. That's what you'll see at Health Impact. And we try to do this in different cities because each city has a different type of problem. If I went to Boston, you have different kinds of healthcare systems and a different level of maturity than if you go to Houston or LA or San Francisco or Tampa, right? And you make it one day, so people come in, they don't have to fly in or anything. They're just there.
Yep.
They come in and you get the highest caliber people who are doing real work every day who can make these decisions. So doing that in a way where instead of making you come to us, we come to you is what we run, is how we run Health Impact.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. Now, are you bringing in speakers, or are you also tapping that local community to have them come out and talk to their peers, so to speak, as part of the workshops and things?
Easily 60% of our speakers come from the local guy. So if you see a speaker up there, you can actually get his business card and talk to him again 2 days later. Like this happens at many events, right? We'll go to the event, we'll run into a guy, super smart guy, but I'm here in Washington, D.C., he's here, and he's over there in LA. You really network, right?
Yep.
So here, what we try to do is easily half the speakers will be local-ish, right? Maybe an hour or two away kind of thing. And we want to create that camaraderie, that community, sense of community. Find the guy, he's going to help you. Find the nurse, he'll help you. Find the doctor, she'll help you. Find the CIO to work together. And really, one of the interesting things we find out is that CIOs from one hospital will get called in to talk at another board meeting, at another hospital's board meeting to say, look, yeah, we got this working. This hospital is not a competitor. It's half an hour away, but we got this to work. It'll work in your environment as well. So it's not a vendor coming in. It's not a sales pitch. It is, yeah, this is working. This is not, because as you know, boards in hospitals are not like boards in very large companies. These are, if you're a hospital donor, you happen to be on the board. You may have no idea how to run a hospital. You have no idea about cybersecurity. You have no idea about population health, but you donated to the hospital, so you're sitting on the board. Now imagine donors, folks who don't know exactly how to run a hospital. They need this kind of advice. So it was very exciting to see some people sharing in that way is you come to my hospital, explain what you're doing. I'll go to your hospital, explain what you're doing. So this happens in academic centers fairly regularly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen in most other environments, like in a commercial or non-academic medical center. It's not common, but we try to foster that in these events.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's no agenda there other than actually helping share, which makes both sides more open and makes for some really good conversations. So that's cool. And I experienced that even on a really small scale with a Health 2.0 Buffalo chapter we started here. And there was two big hospital systems and a lot of I call them the middle tier, middle management types were coming, and they were like, this is great. I never have any opportunity to talk to these other people. And yeah, they're competitors, but those levels of folks aren't thinking about it like that. They're just thinking about how do I get my job better every day? How do I do my job better every day? And they really appreciated that kind of local connection. So awesome. Sounds like a great event. Is there any particular session or speaker there that you're really looking forward to?
So we do have what I like most are the CIOs that are doing the most advanced things. So we have Dr. Shafiq Rubb, who's at Hackensack. So he actually went over, he's been doing some work in precision medicine and things like that. So having a guy who's solving daily problems, keeping his CIO shop open while doing really advanced things, that becomes very, very helpful because then you can talk to them and say, hey, Shafiq, what are you doing here? How is it? Why is it Hackensack able to do this? And why aren't we able to do this? And so in the New York area, some very, very big organizations that are there. So I love those kinds of CIOs that are actually out there doing very advanced things, but keeping their house in order, right? It's not like they are just working on innovation, and they leave the daily problems to somebody else. I mean, they have to sweep the floors every day and work on.
Those are the people who get it done, move things along. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So sounds like a great event. I love the no PowerPoint rule. In my consulting world, I hate PowerPoints. I always hated PowerPoints, and I'd show up and basically be ready to whiteboard. We always take just our consulting approach, and I get these like sideways looks from people like, "Oh, no PowerPoint." I'm like, "No, we're not going to waste your time with that. Let's get to work." And it's crazy how off-putting that is to people. Like they become dependent on them. So I think that's awesome that you just cut that right out.
Yep.
All right, I know you got a wrap. So anything else you want to throw out there about the show? Health Impact, New York City, May 17th. Check it out. Anything else you want to touch on before you drop off?
Yes, so just for the event itself, go to purposeevents.com, PURPOSE events.com, and that shows you all of our events for the entire year, the last few that we had and the next one's coming up. Again, if you're not in New York, if you're on the West Coast, we're coming to LA in early June. Then we'll be in the Midwest in Chicago, and then back in San Francisco later this year as well. If you have a city where you'd like us to come in and do something like this, let us know. I mean, we'd love to add
Buffalo.
to this.
I'd love to have you in Buffalo.
We do Buffalo in the summer, not in the winter.
It's awesome here in the summer. You'd love it.
All right. Very good.
All right, cool.
Thanks for
next week, everybody, on your way out, go subscribe for next week's session. We've got, I'm probably going to say the name wrong, Niam Yaragi.
That's great. Niam did in fact, if you want to see a preview of what Niam will talk about with us next week, head on down to Politico.com. They did an event last night called Outside In, where they had a panel with guys from Office of Civil Rights. So Brookings, Niam himself was there. You had Anish Chopra, ex-CTO of USA. He was there. They had a lawyer on there. I mean, it was a great panel. Two panels, one on the business side, one on the technology side. And Niam's latest Brookings report is absolutely a must-read. He said some things which are counterintuitive. He was thinking that maybe we're making too big of a thing with cybersecurity, because what he did was he interviewed 22 institutions that were on the wall of shame at OCR, asking them, how did they breach? What did they learn? How much data was actually released into the wild? What would they recommend? So that report that Brookings just released last Thursday, Niam is the lead author of that and the lead researcher. We're going to have him on. So he's speaking at Health Impact on Tuesday, and then he'll follow up with us the next day for any questions that the HC Biz audience has for him.
Yep, I just dropped the link in there, and there's David. I expect you to chime in. He has them coming on Friday, too. So Niam is all over the place talking about this. You can check out a preview there, and certainly on your way out, subscribe and come and chat about it next week. We're going to basically tweet chat around the same topic.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hey, David. I'm looking forward to joining you hopefully on the one later this week and writing for your 10th anniversary blog soon as well.
Oh, very cool.
All right, see you guys.
All right, thanks, Shahid. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone else, for coming. We'll see you next week for the Health IT Security Show, and we've got other really interesting things that we're working on in the background too. I'll be telling you about those real soon. So thank you, Shahid. Have a great day. Everyone else, we'll see you.